Hello, and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hi, my name is Jenny, and I'm your host for today's episode of Author Roundup. Our guest author helps others unlock their leadership potential. She is the founder of J9 Leading Solutions and delivers keynote speeches and workshops all over the world to help leaders and teams do great work. She's the creator of the Step Up and Lead program. Let's get to know her as she talks about her new book, Stir It Up, Stay Relevant, a Self-Coaching Parable. Let's all welcome Janine McClintock. Hi, Janine. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So your book, Stir It Up, was just published a couple of months ago, right?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
please tell us more about it?
I'd be happy to. So it's a unique book in the sense of it's a parable, which some people don't even know what that is, but it's the use of story to portray lessons. And in this case, it's lessons around how to navigate change, how to lead a team through kind of disruption at work. But instead of the typical business book style, it actually follows characters at a fictional corporation, and you get to walk along in their journey as they learn new skills and practice new behaviors to really come out the other end, having been transformed. And I hope that the inspiration when someone reads it is to take that agency over their own career, that you can be your own coach and use self-coaching to really develop professionally and to stay relevant.
I see. So it's not your typical business book.
No, and in fact, it's fun to hear people's reaction because they're often surprised, right? So early readers and folks that have purchased these last couple months have really come back to me and said, that was such a pleasant surprise because it flows a little bit easier. Sometimes when we read a business book, you've got to really concentrate and follow the case studies and the research and the data, and those things are behind my story, but it's told in a way that is, I think, more accessible, and people can really, they're busy and they don't have maybe as much time to read something very heavy and long and thick. And so it's a quick read, and it's a fun read, and people enjoy telling me they enjoy the characters and the dialogue and the story format.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people will be able to relate with that. I mean, sometimes it gets a little difficult to digest it when it's just loaded with business theories and all that, case studies and all that. So I know you do a lot of, talks about leadership and all that, but what exactly inspired the idea for this book?
Well, there is that moment. I was reading the Wall Street Journal. It was the
Mhm.
year 2020. And the article said at that time that in 2024, which happens to be now,
Mhm.
that the statistic was 75% of the work that a manager does in a corporation will be able to be done by AI. And at that, again, 4 years ago, no one was talking about AI like they are today. And it struck me because those are my clients, right? And the people I coach and the people I train are in management leadership positions. And I wondered, are they going to be ready, right, for how to adapt and adjust to stay relevant now that maybe some of the things that are required of them will no longer be required? And how do they build up their own capability to evolve if that actually does happen? So I put that note aside. And when I went through the process of figuring out exactly the book I wanted to write, that really was my anchor. And then I felt like it was really, I knew my client, the target client or the target audience were people that I've worked with for over 20 years that have been in management positions. And so I really wanted to do it for them. And so that was the genesis, was that article and that statistic. And then, here we are, right, where everybody's talking about, hey, how AI is disrupting
Right.
their workplace and trying to figure out how to use it to make it work for them, and not be afraid of it, and all of that. So these characters in this story, they go through that journey, and you can see how it's possible.
Yes, people have different reactions to AI. Okay, so you
Mm-hmm.
said this was during the pandemic around 2020?
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that article was, and then I didn't start the book process until the very beginning of 2021. Those,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, those first 4 or 5 months of the pandemic were a lot of adjusting. I mean, that was a
Right.
disruption at that time, a very big
Mm-hmm.
disruption. So when that kind of hit a point where my work was still somewhat disrupted, right? Because I wasn't traveling and doing keynote speeches in person. I wasn't doing training in person. I
Mm-hmm.
had some capacity. I was able to pivot and do all my coaching online with people. So that was fine. But I had some time, which is often what keeps people from, pursuing a book
Right.
and taking. So I really used that opportunity of that time to start this process, and I there was a program that I engaged in early 2021, and that's when I actually started working on the idea, and it evolved into the book that it is today.
Okay, so let's go back to what you said earlier about this book being a business parable. I know it's about Maribel and her
Yes.
story. Can you tell us a little bit, as much as you can, or just not enough to spoil the book? Tell us something about Maribel's story.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. So Maribel is a director in a company. It could be a company like any company you might think of, and she has a team of people, and they are responsible for the learning and development training in the company.
Mhm.
And she recognizes both the challenge and the opportunity that artificial intelligence could bring to her team. Now, like them, she is very unsure and uncertain what it all means and how it could work. And so she uses a process, and this is where there's kind of themes within or messages within the story as well. So she actually uses facilitation techniques that I use with clients when they're trying to figure things out. And so you'll see that in the story. And of course, every good story has the person that, causes their conflict. And so in this case, her boss is maybe a boss that people will recognize as one that isn't the best to work for, right? We've all maybe encountered them at one time or other. But that helps her grow ultimately. She has to, change her own behavior. And we meet her friends and we meet her family in the story. And she really uses process of coaching herself because her boss isn't helping her to figure out what to do. And then she's able to share that with her team members and pass on what she's learned so that they could utilize that as well. And so, to your point, I don't want to do too much of a spoiler alert, but again, in the feedback I've gotten, people in a professional corporate setting really relate to the characters and
Mhm.
the situations that are there. I mean, I actually my planning process for the story to evolve was storyboarding, just like a TV show or a movie, right? Where you set the scenes. And, I spent 18 years in a corporate environment. So it wasn't hard to remember back to those days of team meetings and nobody speaking up and, getting confusing, conflicting directives from the organization about, well, what is the priority? What are we supposed to be working on? And so again, it was fun to spin it into a story as opposed to kind of a, bullet point list of do this and then that and then this. You see her and the team do all the things. And at the end, they come together around a model that is the model that I use to teach people how to be self-coaches. And so, even though there's the story at the end, you have tools that you can use. You have coaching questions and you have a framework that, as the reader, you can take and apply in your own life.
Mhm. Okay, so let's talk about what you just said, the self-coaching framework, 8 R's, right?
Yes.
How does it go? How do we use it?
Sure. So it's for the first point in self-coaching, there's kind of like, I'll talk about the umbrella first, which really is, you need to evaluate where you are currently, right? And
Mhm.
so there is an assessment for these 8 areas to think about, and I'll share those in just a moment. So the first action or step is to evaluate. So you kind of know, yeah, I'm pretty good on this particular area, but I need some work in that area. That directs you to what action you can take, which is kind of the next part of self-coaching, asking yourself questions in order to help you figure out maybe what to do next, right? What action you might want to take. And then after you do something and take action, you want to then reflect, how did that go? What did I learn? What would I do differently? And then that can inform your next action. So it's kind of a circular process, right? And really coaching, a good coach, if you were to have a professional coach, they do not tell you what to do. They ask you very good questions. The best coaches ask the best questions. And that's what I'm trying to impart to people. In the book, I give questions, in outside of that, in the trainings, we have even more questions. And you learn to ask yourself questions that are going to help you change your belief system. Maybe you have some limiting beliefs that are stopping you from taking the action you need to take. It's going to help, the questions are going to help you identify new possibilities that if you didn't ask the question, you might not have thought up to do the action or to take the movement for yourself. Because the whole idea here is that you can control what you can control, which is you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we depend on either the company or our boss to provide all of our professional development or all of the opportunity to advance our career or to grow, we're not going to get as far as if we take that on ourselves. Right. So that, I mean, why not be the captain of your own ship, right? Why
Yeah.
not be the one directing where your career path is going? So the book provides a roadmap for that. And those 8 R's, which I'm happy to share, that are in the book, help you walk through in a more step-by-step way. And so I already mentioned one of the R's, which is reflecting, right? So the idea of really thinking about who you are, what type of leader you want to be, what are your values, what are your strengths, all of those sorts of things really is any starting point. With anybody I ever work with, that is where we start. And I suggest that if you're coaching yourself, that's where you start. And then you want to think about, I call it refreshing, which is around your brand. And what personal brand do you want to project in your workplace? And there are questions to support that process in identifying your brand, because again, then you are going to make certain choices, decisions, actions based on that. And then you need to reveal all the things you learned in the first 2 sections, the reflection and the refreshing of your brand. You need to reveal that to people in the organization, outside the organization, in your network. You need to share what your goals are, what you're hoping to achieve, because you're going to need other people to help you, right? And so you want to enlist them in that help. And then you want to really, this idea of repurposing
Mm-hmm.
the skills that you have, right? So how can you take what you have, apply them maybe differently or in a different capacity? So you may have heard terms like upskilling or reskilling. They're, in the training development world right now, those are very targeted, focused areas for companies to help their employees, because if AI is doing work, that means the employees have capacity. And so rather than it just being filled up with unimportant tasks, you can be more directed in that. So it's a really good strategic way to focus that. And then give some of the other R's are around ways to rebound from adversity, to
Mm-hmm.
reframe difficult situations, to resolve problems. So those are more skill focused things that if someone's really struggling to be visible in the organization, to get noticed, to stay relevant, right? People are worried about their job becoming obsolete. So if you're a good problem solver, a good decision maker, a good collaborator, those things are going to help you kind of stay, in the forefront of the group and stand out. And so the 8 R's. And the last one is actually as important. Maybe sometimes I feel it's the most important. And I call it refueling, which is you
Mm-hmm.
have to, again, constantly be looking at not only what are you doing at work, but outside of work as well, right? To fill your tank, right? To
Yes.
refuel. Are you getting good social connection with people? Are you getting good sleep? Are you getting good nutrition? That sort of thing. And so just that idea of most of this self-coaching is professionally focused, but in the end, it's our life that we're talking about, our professional life and our life outside. And so there's a little bit there as well to help encourage people to stay on track with that as well.
Okay. And I know there's a diagram in your book of the
Yes.
eight R's. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So here's the book. Start up, and then it's so this the diagram in the book is the eight R's, and this is where you can assess yourself. And then
mhm.
there's pages of questions in the book that are the actual self-coaching questions. So these are all the questions that as Maribel is going through her own journey, her own career journey, she ends up with all of these questions, and that's what she's then able to share with other team members to help them help themselves, right? So
Mhm.
it's like teaching someone to fish, right? So that they can then provide for themselves. The book does that for the reader, and she does that for her team.
Okay. You talk about self-coaching. Is this something that anyone can do, or do you have to equip yourself with some skills first before you do self-coaching?
So great question. And yes, it really is for everyone. And that's also been interesting in getting feedback on the book, because I've had a yoga teacher take something from the book and actually use it with her class and her in meditation around, because it's this idea of, rather than feeling like something is happening to you,
Mm-hmm.
it's making it work for you. And that really applies to a lot of things in life as well, right? And so in terms of needing to kind of be skilled to do it, I would say
Yeah.
no.
Oh.
The main thing, it is about raising your own level of self-awareness, which for some people can be uncomfortable because it might open up some places inside that maybe you've kept a little hidden or not wanting to confront around, around your past or things, because these reflective questions really maybe draw you back. I might ask a question if I were self-coaching myself in a situation of change. I might ask myself, how do I react when change is imposed on me from an external situation, right? And so I'm going to think about that, and whatever scenario might come to and I'll say, and to myself, let me think if I can think of a scenario, and I might think of that scenario, and it might bring up something that's uncomfortable for me, right? So I would say to be ready to be surprised even by yourself in your answers, right? And to have some self-compassion, I think, is very important in a process of any coaching, self or otherwise, because there may be difficult thoughts that come into mind, right? And so one of the techniques that is very common and is used in the book by Maribel is journaling about these things. So sometimes, it's easiest to free associate and journal to these questions to kind of get things out. And then you can step away and then come back to them as well. So there are techniques to doing this. And people, when they're on a walk or listening, or driving their car in the shower, they will think about these questions. So, some of it's internal dialogue. Sometimes people write it out. And even though it's self-coaching, what people also find is they might come to a thought and want to bounce it off of somebody, right? So it might be a colleague or a friend. So it's not done in a vacuum by any means, but it really does start with yourself and learning how questions can guide you to, when, especially I feel like people feel stuck, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if you're feeling stuck, this framework of self-coaching really is a good solution to getting unstuck. Even just the slightest movement, right? A question can get you, and that can lead to the next thing and the next and the next, and then suddenly you've got a new skill that you've developed, and you're ready to put your name in the hat for a new responsibility in the office and all of those things, rather than waiting for somebody to hand you something that is not going to just be handed to you, right? Not in this work environment these days, right? And that's actually a good thing to point out. Another kind of underlying trend that I was seeing in my work in companies is needing to shift the mindset that it's only the company's responsibility to do that professional development for you, right? It is a partnership. Yes, great companies provide opportunity for development and growth, but it is also the employee's responsibility to kind of marry what's being offered and provided with what they need, and taking their own. I mean, we're so lucky in this day and age, we can take a course at MIT for free, in open type of, internet class that We can really develop ourselves. We can volunteer, in our community for a nonprofit and learn new leadership skills there outside of work that then we can bring back. So there are a lot of things that we can do for ourselves. And when we feel that empowerment, our life, I find that people find their stress level comes down because they're not so wound up about what's happening to them because they're doing things to change their situation or to adapt or evolve with what's happening.
Yeah, that's a refreshing take on it. The typical mindset of someone is that you'd wait for someone to mentor you or coach you, someone in the workplace who's a senior or whatever. And it's refreshing to know that you actually have control on these things. Okay, so for someone who's just starting it out, if they follow the framework of your 8 R's and they find themselves stuck in any of those, what do you recommend to them? Like, how do they move on to the next?
Well, so it's not even necessarily linear, which so I hope, and that's even why it was kind of drawn circularly, right? You
Mhm.
might be in the situation in a moment where you need to resolve an issue at work, like, so you want to focus your time there. So then it's kind of diving into those questions. And here's an interesting thing. This just it's coming out of my mind right now is you could take my questions right in that
Mhm.
section and you could ask ChatGPT, what are other self-coaching questions I could ask myself to be a better problem solver, right? I mean, there are ways,
Mhm.
you can keep digging. One of the techniques as a coach, when I'm working with somebody and they're having trouble articulating what they want or what they need or what they should do, an easy prompt is, well, let's like this idea of tell me more, like peeling the onion back a bit more. What's
Mhm.
underneath that? What's behind that? And those kind of prompts, I do think when you're self-coaching and you're stuck, also work in that context. It's like, okay, what am I not admitting to myself here, right?
Mhm.
What if I were to take this another layer deeper than the surface that I'm on right now with this answer? Because it's not the kind of activity where you're rushing to get an quote unquote answer. There's not a right answer, right? You might need to think about the question for some time before an answer comes. And generally, because our brain is kind of lazy, the first answer that comes is not going to really probably pack as much in it as those answers a few layers down. When
Mhm.
I don't know if you're familiar with in strategic thinking, there's an activity called the 5 Whys, WHY, right? And
Mhm.
that's the idea with yourself. It's like, well, if I believe X, why do I believe that? And then you keep asking why several times, because when you keep doing that, you really get closer to the root of the answer.
Mhm.
So it's interesting because a lot of what I've applied in a strategic planning process or different things where you can apply these practices is what I call them to yourself, right? And but also I think this idea of not rushing or not pushing actually is helpful, just like in the creative process, right? When you step away sometimes from the work or the problem or the issue or where you're stuck and even go do something fun or exercise or something and you come back to it, is maybe when you can have that aha. And I do really encourage people to find mentors, to find peers that they and colleagues that maybe outside of their workplace within a professional organization that might have similar work that they do but at different places. So having people to talk to about what you are thinking and what you are feeling and what you are processing is helpful, right? Because if you do that in the silo all by yourself, that can feel, I think, a little daunting for people. So it's not to imply that it's a solo effort, right? It's just this idea that you don't necessarily have to hire a professional coach for hundreds of
Mhm.
dollars
Yeah.
an hour, right? That there's
Mhm.
things that you can do, and again, the readers will notice in the story that these ideas are woven in the story. Maribel has a mentor, right? So, these ideas of tapping into a professional network,
Mhm.
as a way to grow, right? Because you're meeting new people, you're having new experiences, you're getting new perspective, which is all the things that you're trying to do as you coach yourself.
Yeah, so it works hand in hand with the other resources that are available to you. Okay, so let's talk about your journey as an author this time. So
Okay.
you mentioned earlier that the idea for the book started in 2020. Okay, can you tell us how long it took for you to complete your book?
I'd be happy to, right? So that was kind of the idea. So the work of trying to write a book, which started with,
Mm-hmm.
what's my outline and all of that, was in
Yeah.
2021. So really, well, the story, which I do want to share, because often a new author, you might take a path and then have to take a detour, and that's what I did.
Yes.
So I wanted to share that part of the story to encourage people who sometimes they start down a path and they just get stuck at the fork in the road and they don't keep going or take the detour. And I did that. And one of the biggest challenges in general for someone like me who's a subject matter expert, I have
Mhm.
all of this information, and to put it into one book, the initial work was really, how do I focus my message and what it is I want to say. And because a number of authors that I had talked to said that's a trap, right? You try to put everything you know in your first book,
Right.
don't do that, and so I did a lot of that work up front, and I spent several months on, doing the outline of what the book could be, coming up with this model of the 8 R's, again, tapping into the work I actually do with clients, right? To form that, and then putting together the proposal to send to agents and publishers and all of that. So that process, and I feel like you're working really hard on all of that, doing your competitive analysis to other books that are like your book and all of that. All of those
Mm-hmm.
steps were really important, but you're really anxious. I was really anxious to start writing the book, right? So, several months of planning and work to get ready to write, I do think, though, was very important. So I'm glad I did that. And then I started writing the book, right? I have my outline, my chapters. I start the work on the chapters. So I spent about 6 months writing a traditional formatted business book. And
Mm-hmm.
I probably wrote 4 of the chapters in all in that way. And then I really did some self-coaching, and I had wanted to write creatively. I had wanted to write and use story. A lot of the executives that I coach, one of the skills they develop, they might be the CEO of a company, but developing storytelling as a tool for messaging is something that I work with clients on. And I really had to listen to my own intuition and gut. And I went back to my coach. I was working with a coach, and said, this just isn't feeling like the book that I was meant to write. I
Mm-hmm.
really want to write a book that's a parable, that's a story. I was
Mm-hmm.
influenced early in my career by a couple books that were in this format. And I thought, gosh, if I'm thinking about those books and those messages 20 years later, I want to do that kind of story. And it was a good lesson. And this is just, you're your own laboratory in some ways. It was a good lesson in, yes, I sought out the expertise of coach who'd written 48 books. And, I did listen to her because I thought, well, she knows what she's doing. But in the end, your book is your book, and
Yeah.
you should take it. And then she was very supportive when I took my detour, and we continued to work. And the fun part is she wrote the foreword, and she talks about this in the foreword too. So taking that detour was part of my process. So that added some time to the process, because I kind of went in a way to square one. I had the
Mm-hmm.
model, and then I didn't get discouraged, because in terms of my work, all of the research and the work that I did for the business kind of format, I'm using in other ways, in other copy and training and
Mm-hmm.
workshops and speeches. So, I didn't get discouraged. That I don't look at it as wasted time. It was just more, research time. But when I actually storyboarded the story and sat down and wrote it, I really wrote it over about a 12-week period. And I did that through what I found was easy. When it's storyboarded by scene, I could my goal, I would kind of pull a scene a day and work on that scene. So sometimes I would the scene would come quickly and it would be 45 minutes. Other days that would be maybe 2 hours. But I set aside a couple hours a day over the course of it happened to be during the summertime to do that, when my other work is again a little bit quieter in the summer. Clients take vacations, they're not planning, big group events because people are traveling, that sort of thing. So all told, that was a year and a half process of writing, and to get that what they call the first draft. And then I entered the editing phase, which again, I was fortunate. My coach was also an editor. She helped me edit. So by the time the book went to the publisher, it was actually pretty well put together, which was nice. I'm sure publishers get the books in all forms, but mine was pretty well edited at that point. And then it was some time. Then you have the time for the publisher and another stretch, right? Till it becomes a book, because you're helping design covers and giving input to all of the things. So it's 3 years is the short answer to that very long answer I gave. So I guess it was though realistic to what I thought it might be. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to be fast.
Yeah.
So, and I read a lot, and I mean, I'll hear authors talk about how it took 7 years or 10 years, or,
Right.
it can take a long time. So in some ways, I feel like I felt a little urgency at the end, because during that time the AI became such a trending topic. And I thought, I really want to get this in the market, when the iron is hot, right? People are interested in that. Yeah.
That got me interested when you said that you started to write the traditional business book and you already had 4 chapters in. And then there was a shift because you decided to write in a business parable instead. Tell us about the transition you made, because I can't imagine how it was. Like, which one was easier for you to do?
For sure, the parable. I've had some people say, gosh, I really love the dialogue in your story. There's a lot. And again, see, I'm a speaker. And so writing people speaking was super easy. And again, because I wasn't fantasy. I wasn't really making things up in an imaginary world. It was really set in a place that I lived in for a good part of my career, right? So, visualizing a scene or thinking about what might happen next was so much easier than, I think I got hung up in the traditional business book format in, I'm not an academic. I mean, I have a master's degree in organizational leadership, but it's not like I researched this. I researched it in the field, right? I work with real people and real companies, and I think it felt like a school assignment, right? Where there was a proper way to do it, and I had to get it just right. Some of my own stylistic, beliefs around that. Now, so that was more challenging because I really felt I had a certain measure of what I was trying to produce based on everything else that was out there. And look, comparison kills and everything. And so I think it just kind of felt heavier and harder, and a little bit more confining. When I started to write the parable, it really it flowed very freely, right? It just, the story came. And but partly though, because I had done the work on what the model was, the framework, the 8 R's and all of that. So now I just had to lay the story on top of it. Yeah.
It's interesting because, in the parable, just like what you've mentioned, you have to think of the dialogues, you have to think about the characters. There has to be some sort of character development because there has to be consistency in the way these characters would react, right? Like, how would they say stuff? What would they say? So I find it interesting that it was quite easy for you to do that. Have you always loved writing, or perhaps you have had some experience before where you would write stories and all that?
Yes, I have always loved writing and reading. And early in my college years, I thought maybe I would be a journalist. And I pursued that in college for the college newspaper. And then at the end, I decided that and this was a long time ago, the news isn't what it is today, but much more traditional. But the lifestyle piece didn't feel congruent. And I took a totally different path. But over time, like, I don't know, maybe it's been 10 or 15 years. I took a creative writing class at one of the universities here, thinking I would write a novel someday. And so that seed is there, and that, I think, it allowed me to pursue the idea of writing something in a more creative way. And, maybe another evolution or next book for me could be fully a fiction book, right? Kind of thing. Cause I did enjoy the process. And it's a wonderful community of, when you can find other writers in your area trying to do what you're trying to do. That's one of the things that I ultimately did, was put together a mastermind group of, there's myself and 4 other aspiring authors, and we're all at different phases in the journey, and we come together once a month and just support each other. And it's different than a group where you read each other's pages. It's not that kind of group. It's some of the other almost business part of it. How do you find the publisher? How do you market the book? All of those aspects we're helping each other with. And it's when you need the cheerleaders, it's nice to have them, right? They were kind of a built-in group just of people that want nothing more than for you to achieve your goal, right? And so it's wonderful to have their support.
Yeah, support group of some sorts to propel you to reach your goals with regards to publishing the book. Okay, so let's go back to my question about how long it took. So you said around 3 years, give or take.
Yes,
And you
right.
may have already partly answered this, but take us through your writing journey. I know it's not easy writing a book, but perhaps you can share to us what was the fun part or what's enjoyable about the writing process, at the same time, what's challenging to you
Sure.
or difficult in
Okay.
the entire journey.
Well, again, another technique, again, I always look to who's done it before me, right? And multiple people shared the idea of daily pages as a way to like warm up, right? And it's more free association writing. And it's this idea of people, you're a writer if you write, right? Now, I wouldn't say I was an author probably unless I published something, but you can say you're a writer if you write every day. And
Yeah.
it was some, so I think I bring that up because some of what I learned and what helped make the process easier and that I enjoyed was making it a practice and shifting my mindset to see myself as a writer, which is a different way than I saw myself as a business coach or a leadership coach, right? Like there was a part of me, my brand, I'm now a writer. And so starting that practice of daily pages, which I still do, now it's a part of my everyday, I think was really helpful. And I enjoyed writing for just writing. And yes, I would get ideas and then I would, go back later and bring them forth to my work on the book. But in the moment, you're not trying to achieve anything. And interestingly, it is a place where maybe I would ask myself kind of a self-coaching question, and it would be a place I could write about it and think about it. So I enjoyed learning that that was a practice that's helpful to writers, and I use it and would encourage people to use it. And on the flip side, and like I said, I really enjoyed writing the scenes and the dialogue that went with the scenes. What was not super fun is editing. I like to just move on. I mean, and there's, someone to help, but you've got to, and I heard this very much at the very beginning. Writing is rewriting and rewriting
Mhm.
and rewriting and rewriting. And so I would say, and not that it's more like the tracking of the edits and the rewriting and making the changes, and it becomes very task almost focused as opposed to that creative process. So again, I'm learning about myself as a writer, and that's again based on my style of work. I'm not surprised because I like to, when something's done, then I want to move on, right? And
Mhm.
go. And
Mhm.
so your writing isn't done, right? When you finish that first draft, there's so much more writing to do. And so just learning to sit in that part of the process was a newer experience because so much of it's required, right? You edit and you rewrite and you throw things all the way out, and you can't, what I learned is not to get too attached to anything, right? Because sometimes a scene that you really like that just, like you said, doesn't move the action forward or doesn't work, or maybe it has a conflicting idea, so you've got to change it and all of that. So that part was, I think, challenging for me. But we kind of live in what we need to learn. And so
Mhm.
in terms of learning patience, this process has been good. And in terms of really revisiting things, it's important whether you're revisiting work that you've written or maybe other areas in your work. Coming back to things is important sometimes before moving on too quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's the technical aspect of writing that's not really your cup of tea, but
Right.
unfortunately, it's necessary. So you just
Yeah.
have to go through it,
And I
through
mean,
with
the
it.
good news is I'm okay. Like I don't completely lack the skills of grammar and all that kind of, which is good. Like, so
Mhm.
but when you're going to put a book out, it needs to be perfect or according to
Right.
the style guides and all of that sort of thing. And I guess the other thing that I mentioned earlier that was challenging was narrowing down the content and leaving so much out. And again, good advice, like put that in your next book or in future book or the next, you don't have to put everything in because you want people, your reader, to not feel overwhelmed, to be able to
Mhm.
kind of stay focused too. And have on the back end of all of this, right, have clearer messaging about what is this book, who's it for, what's it about, right? If it's about everything under the kitchen sink, then no one's going to think it's for them, right? And so I'm hopeful that the reader sees themselves in this story and can relate to and then use this concept of self-coaching. And what has been interesting is I had younger professionals, meaning millennials, in that early to mid part of their career, maybe, early 30s to mid 40s kind of demographic. And yet I've had very new to the workforce people read it in their 20s, and I've had people in their 60s still work, in the workforce reading it. And because we all really are experiencing change at some level, people take things from the model, which is, how do you navigate? Because with change, it's not, we often don't control the actual change. It maybe the company has announced a change. What we
Yeah.
control is how we navigate the transition from where we are to what the new is, right? We have to,
Mhm.
acknowledge what's ending. We have to figure our way through the messy middle of a change and transition to come out to the other side and really work in this case in a new way. And that really happens throughout our life over and over and over again. So this is a skill that if you do develop it early, this capability, you can then really, I think, leverage it over your whole lifetime.
Okay. I think that's true. Everyone can relate to the book. I mean, it cuts across demographics and all that. Doesn't just apply to a certain age group and all. So your book has been out for a few months now, and I'm seeing really good reviews in, the Amazon and the reseller sites. They love it. So I'm sure that do you take time to read the reviews or the feedback?
I do. And because even in my work as a coach, one of the things I coach around a lot is how to give and receive feedback, right? Because and I do, I really have to convince people often that feedback is a useful gift, a tool that people are giving you to use to get better. Because, my philosophy is I want to be better tomorrow than I am
Mhm.
today, just a little bit. If you approach your development that way, a little bit incremental improvement every day, and feedback is really a way to do that. And so I do read the reviews. And then what's really interesting, because the book is in the hands of many of my corporate clients, hearing their reactions to how people are actually using what the book has in it after the fact. So an example was I did a leadership development couple days of training with 40 managers in a company, and the book had just come out. So the training wasn't really necessarily specifically geared on the book. It was broader leadership training, but I talked about self-coaching. And at the end of the training, the organization gave everybody a copy of, and I'm going to be meeting with them again in the fall. And it's between that, over the summer, they're kind of asking everybody to read the book. very quickly, the client called me and said the managers that are attended are talking about it, they're using it. And so the feedback that it's applicable in real life and people are using the questions and the model is the most fulfilling feedback to get, right? Because that was my goal, is to put it in people's hands. And so, and then the range, another conversation. So I'm circling to people that I know have the book and trying to, not directly ask them, but if I'm in conversation, the book will come up and then what do you think? And so getting actual face-to-face feedback, which doesn't necessarily show up on Amazon, has been very rewarding. And I don't know that a lot of authors have the opportunity to do that. And if they can create that opportunity, I think it's very valuable to really hear how people are relating to the content of the book. And another gentleman, he's a chief innovation officer for a large academic university here in California. And they have an innovation center that helps startup companies and, students, researchers try to bring their ideas to the market. And we met, and he came with the book in his hand, and he talked about the book for our whole lunch, and because he was suggesting that, it really will fit well into a narrative, kind of a visual training that it could be, because it is a story, so you could have people, in the old days in training, actors acted out things to teach lessons to people, but that's a much more avatar driven, virtual reality kind of thing. And so again, where people connect their own dots is really interesting when you get to talk to them directly. And, when I look and look, any author, who might be listening, or prospective author, you need to be ready for people to not like the book, or to not relate to the book, or to give you feedback. So I got feedback also from another author, right, who's experienced. And so I think he felt he really could be direct, and he had some very significant suggestions, and that's all they are, right? They're suggestions. And some things I could incorporate in like future marketing and things like that. I could think about how it might pertain to that, but at a certain point the book was in production, right? So I'm not going to add certain things that he might have suggested and that kind of thing. But it was, even as trained as I am, it was hard to receive that at first, but then I really kept coming back to it. And I have to remind myself, I may have been in my field for decades, but I am a new author. And so I am a student, I'm a learner, I'm a beginner, and that's okay. And so if I'm not getting some feedback like that can help me be better, then I'm missing out.
That's a very positive way of looking at things. But I'm sure it was also fun listening to all of the suggestions that they gave you, and just seeing how the book impacted their lives and how they're using it, applying it to advance their careers, perhaps, and just in general, just be a better person, a better employee, and all that. So
Real quick, the other one that I appreciated is several people have said to me, and I'm either passing it on to someone or I'm suggesting to somebody else to read it. That was like
yes.
that's very exciting when someone says that to you, or you get that kind of feedback.
Yeah. So that just means that they really were able to connect with the book, because when you experience something really good, you'd want people that you love to experience it too. So that's why you're passing it on to them. Okay. So as a writer now, you've just finished your first book. What advice can you give to someone who is just working on his or her first book? So the exact same place that you were a few months ago.
Right, right. The first is to seek out I mentioned before, but first you want to seek out some resources that, people that know more than you do about what you're doing, right? And it can be confusing. There's a lot out there, right? A lot of people saying they can help you, but building that community around you. So it can feel lonely and like a solo effort, writing a book can. And so again, for my personality, I don't work well that way. So building a little, a writing village around myself, or whatever you want to say, was helpful. So I would say make sure you work in the way that does work well for you. And it might be needing to bring some other people into the process. I think it's important that it is different for everyone, right? And so even this example I gave with my coach, my book coach, her style and what she would do is maybe different from my style. And I learned that lesson, and it's okay. There's not a quote unquote right way to write your book. So just listen to your intuition, listen to yourself, certainly listen to the experts too. But I think in the end, book is your book. And I think what we just talked about, this idea of being open to feedback, because feedback before the book ever comes out is important, right? You're having early people read drafts, you're having people, you might be sharing early ideas on the concept. So how can you elicit feedback so that you are not working in a vacuum and getting to a point and then not having what you need to do that? And really the most important thing I think I want to say is keep going, right? Keep going to that, get that first draft done. It's going to be not look anything like what your final draft is going to look like probably. And that's okay. So I think it does take tenacity and perseverance to finish. Again, I've read and heard some stats that, a lot of people say they want to write a book and they never even begin. A lot of people that do begin do not finish, right? And so it takes a lot to get there, and to again, have that self-compassion and grace to understand that it's a process, and to stay with it and to have fun. The minute I started having fun with the process, truly having fun, it really was energizing. And so if people were to ask me if I would do another book, I would say yes, based on how I felt when I wrote what I ended up with as the book, right? I don't know, because I didn't take the other path of finishing the traditional book and so forth. It's interesting, when I read a lot of business type books. Maybe not everybody does. And I just really felt like this book could reach more readers and reach more people. So, yeah. So have fun with it. Being a writer doesn't have to mean, drudgery and difficulty and hardness. It can be very fun and very empowering. I mean, I really felt, getting my words on the paper and getting them published was very empowering.
Okay. So now that you've already mentioned it, like there are a lot of ideas for a second book and all that, I have to ask this: more can we expect from Janine after the first book? What are your goals, both for the book and professionally? Just looking at until maybe the end of this year.
Okay. Yeah. So my goal is, I'm actually doing. Sorry, I'm going to start that answer over. So some of my goals for the book are to try to talk as much as I can about it. So doing interviews like this, hoping with the client base that I have to go into those organizations and actually talk to their employees and talk to audiences in my keynotes about what self-coaching is and how they can use it. And then they would have the book as a tool for that. And then also, my mission in my work is to help people unlock the potential that they have inside them. So it is really about getting the book into people's hands. And some of the ways that I'm doing that too are, I work with a blend of nonprofit and for-profit clients. And so for the nonprofit clients that we work with, I am getting books in their hands. So it's really getting not only the word out there, but literally getting books in people's hands really is my goal. And for myself, it's also to enjoy this part of the process, right? So the marketing and promotion and getting the book out into the world is not easy either, right? That's a lot of work as well. And again, I, like many authors, it's on top of my full-time job, right, that I have as a consulting professional. So how do I create space for it? And I'm kind of doing it like I did with the writing. I, have to carve out and plan time for it. But I want to enjoy it. If I have an event, I want to have a good time. If I am doing a virtual book club with it, I want to have fun. So I want to be creative in the coming months to the end of the year in terms of how I position the book and share it with the world. So that's really my focus, is how can I best do that strategically and in a way that I can enjoy.
How about that second book that you mentioned?
Yeah, it could be, right. A lot of series are popular, and so I could take Maribel. We could pick up her story, and I could
Yeah.
take another part of the work that I do, that is common for the coaching that I do, and take another aspect of that and again weave it in a story type thing.
Mhm.
So that would be probably the lowest hanging fruit. I don't have an extreme different idea. I really, like I say, because I had so much fun, a series could be fun. And I think I'll use the feedback and see what the response is in terms of the sales in the next 6 months, to see, is there an appetite? Are people interested to know what happens next,
Yeah.
right, to Maribel and her journey? Yeah.
That's exciting. I'm sure a lot of your readers would be looking forward to that. So, Janine, what's your final message to everyone listening and watching us right now?
So my final message would be to bet on yourself, right? To believe in yourself, to invest in yourself. And in this case, it's, maybe for the low cost of a book, right? That you are the one that really can craft your journey for professional development to stay relevant. That this rapidly changing work environment that you may find yourself in doesn't have to be as scary and threatening as you might feel like it is right now. If you get my book, if you go out and you get stirred up, it will provide you some resources and tools to help you help yourself, and you're worth it, and you can do it. You can create and craft a roadmap for yourself that's going to take you to the next level professionally, or at least get you unstuck from where you are. And I hope that you will take that on for yourself, because again, I believe that each of us is worth it, that we're worth our time and investment in ourselves. And you are the best steward of your career, not the company, not somebody else, you. And so if people want to get the book, certainly it's available on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles and at my publisher, Balboa Press, or they can go to my website, which is J and the number 9, leadingsolutions.com. And I really, if I can, I'd love to share one of my personal missions, and my business mission is to support professional development in those working in different nonprofits in our community and throughout the country. And so I have a program called Buy One, Give One. And so
Mhm.
when you buy one of my stirred up books, I will donate a book to a nonprofit. And some of the nonprofits that the books are going to include Make-A-Wish, Goodwill Industries, and CASA, which is Court Appointed Special Advocates. So those are some of the organizations that have already been receiving books that when people purchase, I'm able to donate to their staff, so that these professionals in these nonprofit environments serving so many different areas in the community, they can grow and develop as well. So thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. You just are full of surprises. So thank you so much, Janine, for all the insights you've shared with us. I really enjoyed our conversation. So to all our viewers and listeners, again, you can get a copy of Janine McClintock's book, Stir It Up, Stay Relevant, a Self-Coaching Parable. It's available in paperback, hardback, and ebook. And you can order it from Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, other reseller sites, of course, also from Balboa Press online bookstore. And make sure to check out Janine's website too. That's www.j9leadingsolutions.com, and get to know her and all the amazing work that she does. Thanks again, Janine, and to everyone watching and listening. Until the next episode of the Author Roundup.